Hello everyone. The focus for this week is sociology in Asia. Now Asia covers a very large section of the world, as you'll see in a minute, and I'm going to introduce you to a few sociologists across the region. It's not a comprehensive list, it's far more of a taster. What I'm going to do in the lecture is introduce you to some people and their ideas, but I've added links to them talking as well to fill out the lecture. So that is, rather than listen to me bang on, go and listen to these scholars who are making waves across the world. What I want to do as well is just apologise in advance for my pronunciation, which I recognise is very limited because I do only speak English. So when we're thinking about Asia, as I said, it is a very, very large area. There's Central Asia with Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, or the Stan countries, I guess I would call them. Some people regard those areas as one of the most closed regions in the world. The countries offer really kind of spectacular landscapes and lots of adventure, particularly if you think about the history of Marco Polo and elsewhere. In the East Asia region, which is coloured in mustard in this map, there's China, Hong Kong, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea, etc. Lots of contrasts of old versus new, big mega cities at the front end of technological development now, and that often combines with well-preserved temples and sites of ancient cultures and philosophers, which are still actually very present in everyday society. If we then have a look at the brown region, which is the Middle East, Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Israel, etc. They're also regarded as part of Asia, home of the very first civilization in the world's history and the land where the three Abrahamic religions were revealed. So that's Judaism, Christianity and Islam, and is now one of the fastest growing regions of the world with increasing development of technology, but a really rich heritage as well. And in the purple, there's what's called the Caucasus. So it's Russia, and the Caucasus is in that purple region, covers a great deal of Asia, a huge country of very vast and empty expanses, and the Caucasus is regarded by some as a very warm, friendly region, but some of it is seen as unstable as well. And in the green area, we've got South Asia, which is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Pakistan, etc. The Himalayas in the north, tropical humid waterways in the south, and some of the most chaotic cities, I guess, as well. And in the pink region, that's Southeast Asia, Brunei, Cambodia, Singapore, Vietnam. Hot, humid region, Buddhist monasteries, tropical beaches, and very popular areas with tourists from Australia and other regions. So one of the people that I want to introduce you to is Dr. Chandrakala Harti, who is one of the very earliest sociologists from the Asian region. She was born in 1903 and died in 1990. She was a very prominent author, feminist, social worker and professor in Bombay in India. Much of Dr. Harti's work entailed studying and improving the status of women in Indian society. She received an MA in economics and wrote Hindu Woman and Her Future, and that was published in 1948, and she wrote that for her PhD thesis in sociology and was advised by an influential sociologist, Dr. Guray. She was considered extremely forward-thinking at that particular time, and the study advocated the education of women as well as increasing the acceptability of women in the workforce. After her PhD, she continued to write prolifically. She wrote the books Changing Status of Woman in Post-Independence India, that was published in 1969, and another book called Turn with a 2, published in 1978. And she also contributed often to many English and Bombay magazines as well. Dr. Haiti taught as a professor of sociology at SNDT Women's University in Bombay and began an organisation called Kutum Saki in 1975 to help socially disadvantaged women employ themselves. And that organisation initially began as a group of women sort of stitching petticoats from cloth purchased from a mill which was owned by a cricketer by the name of V.J. Merchant. However, to improve revenue, the organisation turned to cooking snack foods, and over the years, it's become quite successful in the Mumbai eatery areas, and in turn has served a role in empowering many women to take control of their futures. As of 2005, the organisation has outlasted Dr. Haiti. The organisation employed around 150 women, many of whom are widows or deserted wives. So that's the first person that I wanted to introduce you to, one of the very earliest women sociologists in the Asian region. Then I also wanted to introduce you to Andre Beitel, who was born in 1934. He began teaching at the University of Delhi in the late 1950s. The university was still quite small at the time. It was established as recently as 1922. The university was small. The Department of Sociology was very small as well. It only had 6 teachers, did have 12 PhD students and 30 master's students as well. Usually academics in India, in Indian universities, especially in the humanities and social sciences, at least according to Andre Beitel, didn't have individual rooms. They were kind of, I guess, hot desking, we might call it today. But he did have his own room, and he really, really valued that. And he valued the spaciousness at this new university, which was very difficult, very different from Calcutta, which he experienced as much more crowded. He talks about some cultural difficulties in Indian universities as well, that in a culture where a young man expects his elders to find him a wife and an occupation, it doesn't necessarily foster much independence of thought, and so PhD students often expected supervisors to select their topics as well. Andre Beitel is regarded as one of India's leading sociologists and writers. He's particularly known for his studies of the caste system in South India. He's authored many books. In the words of historian Ramchandra Guha, Beitel has written insightfully about all the major questions of the day: India's encounters with the West, the contest between religion and secularism, the relationship between caste and class, the links between poverty and inequality, the nurturing of public institutions, the roles and responsibilities of the intellectuals as well. And he is known as kind of the Indian Max Weber. So this is some of his work on caste, and caste can be defined as a small and named group of persons characterized by endogamy. So that's the custom of marrying only within the limits of a local community, a clan or a tribe. And so it's characterized, so caste is characterized by endogamy, hereditary membership, and a specific style of life. In traditional Indian society, the caste system had legal and religious sanctions, and there were different castes which were assigned different rights, and punishment differed not only according to the nature of the offence, but also according to the caste of the offender. Class is a little bit more open than caste. You can change your class position by becoming a landowner, for example, but in the way of the past in India, you couldn't actually change your caste. In terms of mobility, in terms of who moves up and down, it is the individual. In terms of a caste, it's an entire community which actually changes the position. During the rule of the British and afterwards, there has been a change, there has been a decline in the influence of the landlord class and the rise of a political system that allows others other than the landlord class to acquire power. And in some ways, the traditional relationship between caste and power has been reversed, whereas in the past, power was concentrated in the hands of the Brahmins. They were seen as the top caste. Today, it is controlled by the non-Brahmins, so that with a change from a static traditional social order to a more dynamic one, the economic and political systems change as well. So you can see there the differences, the three relations of stratification within one particular Indian village before British rule. Another person I wanted to talk to you about is Arjun Appadurai, born in 1949, born in Bombay in India, and has a PhD from the University of Chicago and teaches at New York University. One of the things that is really interesting about his work, and I'd encourage you to listen to him speaking about this, is that what he wants people to do is teach subordinate people or subordinated people how to do research so they can do their own research. So he's talking there, say, about communities in India, what he would like to be able to do rather than just have a researcher go in, even if it's participant action research, which we've talked about before, where participants are involved in what they would like the research to look like, and then the researcher goes out and does that research, and the participants are certainly actively involved in some of the analysis and discussion around that research. What he wants to do is go, what I think is a step further, and actually employ people who might be illiterate, might not have very much sort of formal education, but actually teach them to go and do the data collection themselves and go and do the data analysis themselves as well. So they would get paid then to do the research rather than rely on paid researchers within research institutes or within universities. Another person who teaches sociology, but she's also a novelist, is Natasha Kaul. She was born in Kashmir and has lived in the UK now, though, for more than 10 years, and she's currently a lecturer at the University of Westminster, and is researching the democratisation of Bhutan. She has written a novel, which is the first novel in English by a Kashmiri woman, and was shortlisted for the Man Asian Literary Prize. She argues for thinking beyond nations, for thinking beyond what she calls concentric circles of self, and that'll make more sense in some slides coming up. Beyond the self, one's family, one's nation. She says that's way too narrow, and instead she's arguing for thinking about development in terms of relationships between countries, between groups of people. So again, I've included some of her lecture, so you can listen to her talk on that particular topic. So we've talked about a bit about India. It wasn't until the late Qing or Qing dynasty from 1644 through to 1912 that sociology was introduced to Chinese intellectuals. Because of its grounding in Western theoretical frameworks, pioneers of Chinese sociology have tried to indigenize it as well. One of the Chinese sociologists was a man by the name of Wu Wenzhou. He was not just a sociologist, he was also an anthropologist and ethnologist. He was born in Jiangsu and admitted to university in 1917. In 1923, he had a schoolmate, Pan Gungdan, who persuaded him to go abroad to study, and he went to Dartmouth College. And studied there, and he did classes in biology and chemistry and the other natural sciences, which influenced him greatly. And he later attempted to have his students use the scientific methods he learnt at Dartmouth. He wanted them to pick up in their social studies as well. In 1925, he was admitted so Dartmouth is in the United States. He was admitted into Columbia University, and in 1928 he got his PhD in the Department of Sociology. And in 1938, what he did was found the Department of Sociology of the Yunnan University. And after that, he served as a professor of Central College for Nationalities. He had some really good students and promoted the localization of sociology and ethnology in China as a whole. And what he says, and I'm going to read a quote for those who are listening to this and not reading it themselves. Scholars of the field should start with assumptions and then verify them with field work and tangible evidence. Theories should be illuminated, confirmed, bolstered, and integrated with facts. To secure an autonomous status for Chinese sociology, scholars of the field need to work out a new synthesis of theories and local realities and employ it as a starting point for training the next generation of domestic academics. Their minds, spirits, and investigations should be independent from Western influences. And this is what is meant by the complete indigenization. So it's encouraging Chinese sociologists to do a couple of things. And one of those is to go into the field with theories in mind, but then test those theories with field work. And he's also encouraging scholars to train the new generation of domestic scholars and indigenize that, so make it less influenced by the West and more local to Chinese sociology. A key player or sociologist who's played a pivotal role in indigenizing sociology in China is a man called Fei Zongtong, who was born in the Wuzhong County of Yongzhou Province in China in 1910. His parents were very well educated, and both of them established schools. His father a middle school and his mother a nursery school. When Fei went to a missionary-founded university, Yangqing University, and was stimulated by the visit of Robert Park from the University of Chicago. He then went and studied at the London School of Economics, and he went off and he did field work. Well, he went to London and then he came back and did field work in the Yangtze province. He found it a really, really traumatic time. He was doing the field work. He had a leg of his was crushed by a tiger trap, and his young bride, who was with him at the time, went to get help for him and then died going to get help. So he was saved and she wasn't. So that's quite a tragic, that's not the normal story of doing field work, but it really was quite a tragic one. So from a very young age, Fei considered fieldwork to be the single best approach to renewing and acquiring true knowledge. So for him, fieldwork was really paramount. And in his opinion, knowledge comes from an understanding of objects and phenomena that are inherently volatile and is therefore subject to constant modification and improvement. And without first-hand experience at a given location, an accurate grasp of sociological features is virtually impossible. So he absolutely advocates going out into the field and getting to understand a province, an area, or a town for yourself rather than read about it. So after doing research, he came to realise that scholars should have theories and hypotheses in mind before doing fieldwork as well. So that was another feature of his teaching, or it will be difficult, if not impossible, he says, to collect and sort out data in an orderly mind. And I guess we probably all do research with something in mind anyway, and I guess it's about calling that to our attention so that it becomes more conscious rather than unconscious. So his fieldwork, grounded in theory, became Fei's approach to Chinese reality. So he's another interesting character that's worth looking up. His book, China's Gentry, was published in America in 1953, and it became a real staple of American university classes on China and was based on his interviews in the field. The publication in America of his book grew out of relationships that he did have with academics at the University of Chicago. So it is possible to do research in one country and then have that picked up and taught in another country as well. So a lot of knowledge of China around this period did come from Fei's work. He was interested in what he calls a differential mode of association, which he sees as having sprung from Confucius and Confucian philosophy. And he talks about relationships resembling this set of concentric circles with the self. And remember that this is what Natasha Kuhl was talking about earlier on. So with the self at the very center, and is then glued together through what he calls differential modes of association, which springs, he says, from the Confucian moral system. So in Fei's view, the mode of association is both representative and reflective of society and civilization. So there's the self, and then there are people within one's circle, and then there are acquaintances outside the circle, and then beyond that are strangers. And of course, the people closer in are the ones who are favoured, and where there'll be affection and favours given, there'll be exchanges, and that's not going to happen at the stranger level, obviously. He also says that the mode of what he calls this mode of association means that China's path to modernity is bound to be quite different from the West because of differences between the organisational, what he calls the organisational mode, and differential modes of association. So in China, it's more this differential mode of association, organisational modes in the West. Probably his most important contribution to sociology and anthropology is this concept of differential mode of association, and he also made lots of important contributions to the study and management and the development of China's rural economy as well. He had what can probably be called a syncretic approach to sociology. So he would take from the West, take theories, etc., but he would add into that Chinese experience, culture, and history as well. So it's and that's why it's called syncretic, a building up of ideas from several sources, not just from one. And just in terms of a contrast with the West, instead of having those concentric circles, he saw the West as an organisational mode of association. So we're organised by hierarchies and firmer boundaries, which I've illustrated pictorially there. And then I wanted to introduce you to Walden Bello, who was born in Manila in the Philippines. He has, as you would probably be aware, the Philippines is in many ways a Catholic nation now, and he had a Jesuit education or a Catholic education. He also went to Princeton University and did a PhD in sociology. He's an activist within his own community and a professor of sociology at the State University of New York, and served as a member of Parliament for a period as well. Walden Bello, after September 11, 2001, He was the leading voice from the South, urging the United States not to resort to military intervention, which he believed would exacerbate the problem of terror. What he wanted to do really was tackle what he saw as the root causes of terrorism in poverty, in inequality, injustice and oppression. And in March 2002, he led what was called a peace mission to the southern Philippine island of Basilan, where the US Army had recently sent their special forces. He was also one of the leaders of a peace mission of Asian parliamentarians and civil society activists that visited Baghdad in March 2003, and that was a last-ditch effort to stop the US invasion of Iraq as well. He also led another mission to Lebanon at the height of the Israeli bombing and invasion of that country in August 2006. So because of his work there, his activist work, he's a great believer in public sociology. So by that I mean engaging with the public, not just retaining information within a university, but actually engaging out beyond the university boundaries. So he believes that we should create knowledge based on the sociology's giants. So he doesn't want to forego the Western giants of the past, nor any of the Asian ones that we've mentioned as well. And furthermore, we shouldn't, he says, forget the importance of dialogue between researchers and researched people. So and I guess that comes through in public sociology as well, where you want to engage with the community at large. You don't just want to talk to other researchers, and that's what he is saying. We should be doing research that encourages a dialogue between people in the university and people who are being studied as well. For him, through including people's voices in research, we can actually be more objective, at least as far as we can be, because you get to know the situation better. You can stand outside it a little bit more, not just come at it from your own subjective position. In fact, actually, he's interesting in that he says objectivity in research can't be achieved through distance, that you actually need to have a close relationship between researchers and organisations. And it's really, if you're staying away from people, it's actually impossible to carry out social change. You need to be sort of upfront and personal. So, and think about, so public sociology is kind of a subfield, I guess, of the wider sociological field of knowledge, and it emphasises, as I said, extending beyond the boundaries of sociology, or the boundaries of sociology within the academy, really, to engage with non-academic audiences. And it's best understood as a style of sociology rather than a particular method or theory or one particular set of political values. But he's quite an important proponent of public sociology, and again I've included a link to him talking so you can listen to that. So, in sum, what I've done today is introduced a few sociologists from the substantial Asian region. Each sociologist has been very significant in their own country as well as in the West, and they're each, of course, worthy of being a topic in their own right. And so that if you have that interest, then I would encourage you to explore each of those and see how they've also contributed to sociology in the West.